Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for tuning in, Paranormal Karen. Where are we? We're still in April. Okay, June, everybody. You can see me at Zanies in Chicago and St. Charles and the Great American Comedy Festival in Nebraska. But tonight, this is great because one of the topics we have not talked about yet here is Bigfoot. Someone sent me an email and said, when are we going to talk about Bigfoot? And I found the perfect guest. His name is Tim Renner. He is from Strange Familiars podcast. He has 4 books. We're going to get to all that. But first of all, thanks for coming on, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Are you in Pennsylvania?
I am in Pennsylvania.
Ah, yes. That is, now that is Bigfoot country, isn't it, kind of?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think it's not, but we have a huge number of sightings here. You have a big, is there a Bigfoot, festival out there? No? A Paracon? There are multiple Bigfoot festivals, out around, on the western side of the state. I'm in the South Central. But around Pittsburgh, they have like the Bigfoot camping adventure, and then they have, oh my goodness, all kinds of cryptid fests and various paranormal festivals. They have something almost every weekend of the summer, I think, out there.
Wow! All right, I got to get in touch. So, tell us all. You can start with either how you sort of got into the paranormal, or how did you, we were talking earlier, and you kind of said Bigfoot is my thing. How did that happen?
Well, I grew up in what I term to be the sort of like golden age of Bigfoot. I was born in 1970, so the Patterson-Gimlin film had just been filmed a couple years before I was born, and then as I was growing up, The Legend of Boggy Creek came out, and that was big, and In Search Of, I loved In Search Of, so In Search Of was huge. So it was right around the time where I guess Bigfoot sort of entered the pop culture. It became more than just an obscure thing that some people knew about, and it really kind of came into pop culture. Remember, it was on the $6 Million Man and stuff like that back then. So
that's right. I saw that episode. It was. Well, now it's cringeworthy.
yeah. Oh, a lot of that stuff is, but when I was a little kid, I just loved it. I ate it all up and became fascinated with it when I was a kid. I read every book I could find, which in our school library, I think was 1. So I just got the same book out of the library again and again, and promptly forgot about it when I became a teenager, and got into girls and punk rock and
as you should,
all kinds of teenager stuff. And then at some point when I was an adult and had the internet, one day I just said, I wonder what's going on with that. I used to really like that stuff. And I looked it up and started finding out about, the more modern Bigfoot sightings and so forth, and just kind of went from there.
Wow. And so now is it, I'm obviously you do all the research. Have you, well, I guess the big question is, have you actually had a sighting?
That's really hard. I'm going to answer no, comma, but.
That's okay.
I saw something very, very big and very, very fast, but I cannot tell you what it was, honestly. I can only tell you it was bigger than anything that should be in the woods in this area, but I can't. I saw it for a split second. It was super, super fast. So, I can't honestly tell you exactly what it was, other than it probably shouldn't have been there, whatever it was.
All right. I already like that phrase. It shouldn't have been there. That's my favorite. And we're all, on this podcast, I like to say we're all in. Nobody's going to ask you skeptical questions. It's all, I want to hear your interpretations and whatever. What do you think? I mean, I know we have the category of cryptozoological, which Bigfoot falls into. What do you actually think that Bigfoot is?
Well, it's a very, very complex question, especially coming from me. Because I don't think it's a giant monkey that's hanging out in the woods. I think if it was, we'd have bones, we'd have a fossil record, we'd have, a body at this point. I think it's something much stranger. Now, what that is a very difficult question to answer. And it's the hardest part of my job as a Bigfoot guy is explaining to people that I absolutely believe these witnesses when they tell me, there was, some of these people have come face to face with it. And I absolutely believe when it was there in front of them, it was solid as a rock. It was as real as, the desk in front of me right now, or anything you can knock on. Absolutely real. But also that there isn't a breeding population. I just can't believe there's a breeding population of these animals in the United States. It just doesn't work out for me because, where do they come from and where do they go? It's a huge question. I often point out that I'd done a story for a journal of Bigfoot research called Wood Knocks that was just focused on 8 square miles in the county I live in York County, Pennsylvania, and an insane number of sightings just in this 8 square miles. And there's no place for a breeding population of giant apes in that 8 square miles. It just doesn't work out. And if they're coming through there, you have to answer why. If they're nomadic or whatever, why and how come they're not seen in other areas around there, in other parts of the county coming through there, and so forth. So I think they're real. I absolutely believe they're real. I believe people are seeing them, but I also believe they're very, very strange. There's something very odd about them. And often, people will go to, they're interdimensional or this or that. I can't answer any of those questions. It becomes kind of science fiction. I think they're just unlike any other sort of what we would term natural animal that's out there.
You know what? I recognize the area code on your phone, but I have played York, Pennsylvania. I have played the Firehouse at York, Pennsylvania. And my best friend's an animal communicator. She moved out of York. And also, my dog has an acupuncturist there, which I know is an odd statement, but my dog has an acupuncturist, a psychic, and a cardiologist now. So I know that area actually pretty well. That's interesting. And I am one of those people that falls into the interdimensional sort of thing. But I agree with you. Not only would there be bones or something, but there would be mistakes. You know what I mean? Like, I know they talk about, UFO ships that have crashed or, Mothman site. I kind of feel like Bigfoot hasn't made a lot of mistakes. Does that make sense how I'm saying that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've brought up that point as well, especially young ones. Before they're, if we're thinking of them like they're these great, a lot of people will say they're just masters of the forest. Well, you think the young ones have to learn,
yeah.
And the young ones would be making mistakes, and you just don't find that. I mean, every now and then you'll get somebody who says, I hit one with my car, or I shot and killed one, and those are very interesting. And some of those people, I kind of take at their word, but the problem with that is the problem with so much Bigfoot evidence, it always goes missing. 100% of the time, these bodies go missing. Whether it's they'll say they walked away for a minute and they'll claim the other Bigfoots came and drug the body away, or the mysterious black van or black helicopter pulls up and takes the body off. Or to me, it almost doesn't matter how the body disappears. The end result is the same. The bodies always disappear. So, it puts this other weird kind of spin on it. And, interdimensional may be the answer. I don't know. I just can't say for sure but that's, certainly a working theory.
Right. I know as an expert, you sort of can't, if you haven't seen it, you can't. And I always, I know in the paranormal, I'm always kind of hesitant to use the word expert because it's kind of stuff we don't know about. But I know as like the guy people go to, you have to, you need the science in front of you. Plus, when you hit a Bigfoot, it is a bitch trying to get your insurance money for that. It's just not in the policy. There's a couple local instances I know of where people claim to have done that, and the police have changed it to bear.
or dogs or cows when these people, and I've talked to these witnesses and they've insisted, that's what they hit. But the police report now, a lot of people say there's a big conspiracy. No, I've talked to the police as well, and they're like, you know what? It's so much easier for us if we just put in the report they hit a cow or something.
Right.
We just don't have to deal with, if we put Bigfoot down, it's, this is our career. We're trying to, make a career out of this. We can't put Bigfoot in reports.
Right. And I know there was a comic that, my friend told me about. This was years ago, and Bigfoot actually it never caught my attention until now because I'm not sure why, but it was a comic and he went out searching for Bigfoot, and the whole thing kind of ended when he found one, because he was kind of like, he did run into one and he was pretty close. In fact, I'll find out who this is and interview them. My friend Lamont will know. And it was such a sort of a stunning, like it was such the moment like frozen in time that it kind of scared him.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the biggest things that convinces me that people are telling the truth. When I've looked into the eyes of grown men and just see their hands are shaking as they're telling me these encounters, they're terrified. My wife is a big skeptic. She thinks I'm pretty kooky for being into all this stuff, but she's been around me at some of these paranormal conventions where witnesses come up and tell me stories, and she, quite a few times she's looked at me when they left and she said, I don't know what he saw, but he saw something, so because they're telling the truth,
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's absolutely convinced me. Witness testimony, science doesn't like it, but I love it.
Yeah. And you know what else? Have you had any reports of them being aggressive?
Yeah, I have.
Oh, really?
In fact, in my first book, I found a local story of a guy, and it just said he was attacked by a hairy monster. It was just a little newspaper article from 1973, I think it was. And I tracked him down after my book was written, sadly, because I couldn't put him in the book. And he told me his story, and it was pretty frightening. He said, so he was in his car. He was parked in a certain area that's kind of known for weird stuff, and his car wouldn't start. He waited there for a long time, for hours. He said something kept coming up and like brushing up against his car, and he couldn't see it. He kept looking. He could not see what this was. Eventually, it got to be about like 4 a.m. He'd been there for hours and hours. He said, I can't stay here all night. I got to go. This is the 70s. There were no cell phones. So he got out of his car and he started running, and he ran right into something. And he wasn't a Bigfoot guy, so he didn't describe it as a Bigfoot, but he said it was big and hairy. He called it a big hairy monster. Like, I ran into a monster, a big hairy monster on 2 legs. And I'm the one. I said, do you think it could have been a Bigfoot? He got very, very quiet. And he said, I never thought about that. Maybe that's what it was. And it beat him down. It sent him to the hospital.
Wow.
And he did not like talking about it. I had to, the guy didn't have an internet presence at all. I had to write him a letter. I found a name in the phone book and wrote him a letter. And it took me, I asked him to call me back. In the letter, he called me back, and it took me about 6 months of talking to him to draw the story out of him. I'd often call him. He'd change the subject. He did not like talking about it. When he did, he said he would have nightmares for weeks afterwards. And he said his girlfriend really hated when I called, because he said he'd wake up for weeks later just with these horrible nightmares and wake her up and stuff. And eventually he stopped talking to me, and I can only assume he was just done. He got as much of the story out as he wanted to, and I'm not going to torture the guy. I'm not going to keep calling him if he doesn't want to talk.
Right.
But yeah, that was pretty intense. Another guy at a Paranormal Fest told me a very similar story. He said his friend was running through the woods. This was in another location. This was in Maryland, and ran into one, and it broke his arm. So
wow.
My takeaway is, Yeah, my takeaway is they don't like to be touched. Maybe don't touch them.
But it's funny that both accounts were not to side with Bigfoot, but what might be thought of as aggressive. If Bigfoot doesn't know you can't see him and you run into him, maybe their perception was I'm under attack. Or have there been others you've ever heard of where just the only thing I heard one night very late on Coast to Coast AM, they talked about people that were camping and something in the middle of the night shook the camper like they thought it was going to be knocked over because something just kind of grabbed it and rocked it back and forth like you're not supposed to be. And they heard the noise. Mm-hmm. But have you ever heard of any one of those coming out and attacking like when unprovoked?
I can't say that I have. If I've heard, like, I haven't collected any reports myself, but I've heard some on podcasts and so forth. But there's usually a gun involved. Somebody either pointed a gun at one or shot. They do seem to know what guns are, and this goes back into reports that I've collected from the 1800s, where they will look at a gun and they know what a gun is somehow. Don't ask me how that is, but they get very upset, and a lot of times, if people have pointed a gun at one, they will get aggressive sometimes, and then if they shoot them, they're bound to get aggressive. They have what I call like a sort of a culture of revenge, where they will. They have been known to follow people home after they've been shot, and then you're in for a world of trouble, because they kind of torment people. Then they'll slap their house and knock on the windows, and even people say they climb on the roof and so forth. So but unprovoked, it's very, very rare. I think they give a lot of warnings. They'll throw stones, they'll scream, they'll yell. They kind of give you a lot of chances maybe to clear out before they get aggressive. It seems like this is all based on behavior reported by witnesses.
Now, has there been, and I might be wrong on this, but have there been any stories where I thought I heard one story about a woman that I love that it's Bigfoots. You know what I mean? Like it's not big feet, it's Bigfoots. That just makes me laugh. The Bigfoots sort of protected her. That she lived out there and there was maybe sort of this unspoken contract, like I'm good here, you're good there, we don't bother each other. And somebody attacked her and it was sort of the Bigfoot that came out like, and sort of put an end to it.
Yeah, I've heard a number of stories, similarly.
So we figure this is a, how do I want to say this? An intellectual being that it's not an animal with just instincts, which that's debatable too. I think animals are way more in touch than we think. But this almost seems like a cognitive. That's the thing I wanted to say. Cognitive being. Yeah.
I mean, I really, the old reports from the 1800s call them wild men, and that's kind of what I feel they are. I think there's some sort of, they're man-like things. They have an intelligence to them for sure, and I think probably a culture as well.
Do we know of any female Bigfoot?
Well, the famous Patterson-Gimlin film that shows the creature, kind of walking across the woods there in Northern California, and it kind of turns and looks at the camera from the 60s. That is a female.
How do we know how that is? If you would, I wouldn't.
Breasts.
Oh, okay.
Quite large. She's quite endowed up top.
Oh, I see. Now, women probably never noticed that. Men probably picked that up right. About that tape, there was a program on, and they went over, and I always think when it's on TV, you take it with a grain of salt because obviously it comes in with an agenda. But is it true that they were like, if this was someone in some sort of outfit, the knees didn't match up or the arms were, there was certain things that you can tell this is not human, that is really the best evidence we still have?
Yeah. Now, you can find as many experts to line up on either side of that argument, as with most things Bigfoot. So, for every expert you get to say, it's not a guy in a suit, you can find probably two or three that say it's a guy in a suit. However, it does seem the proportions are off. And Hollywood at that time, it doesn't seem like they had the technology to make a costume that good. The best costumes at the time, I think, were Planet of the Apes, and they hadn't even thought about things like arm extensions, which you would need to fill out that costume. It has a very peculiar bent-kneed walk to it. Now, other people have said, well, it's a guy in a costume. He's going to walk peculiarly. Maybe not. At this point, I come down on the side of it. I think it shows something real. But, like I said, for every person you can get to say that, you can find two experts on the other side to say, nah, it's a guy in a suit. The interesting thing about that is when I talk about disappearing evidence, it's almost poetic because that film, the original canister of film, has gone missing. So we do not have the original real film. We only have copies of that film. And there is a guy who claimed to be in the suit. A fellow named, I'm going to blank on his name now. But anyway, there's a guy who claimed to be the guy in the suit, but he cannot produce a suit. So the suit is also lost if there ever was a suit, which is, to me, completely poetic as far as, the Bigfoot evidence and paranormal evidence in general. Not only is there evidence, you can't find the evidence to prove it, nor can you find the evidence to disprove it.
Interesting. Yeah. I made the most elaborate, perfect costume ever. And I don't know, maybe I left it at the Goodwill or something.
Yeah, exactly. He's just never been able to produce it.
Right. And hang on one second, Tim. We will be right back. Hey, you guys, looking for a great book? Never Give In to Fear, Laughing All the Way Up from Rock Bottom is the National Indie Excellence Award winner. This critically acclaimed, funny and dramatic memoir describes an emerging stand-up comic's drug-fueled descent into the underworld, escape from human traffickers, homelessness, and ultimate redemption. I promise you guys, this is going to be a movie someday. As one of the most inspiring stories I've ever heard. And after I read the book, I bought 20 copies and I sent it to my friends, who then bought 20 copies and sent it to their friends. And if you have not yet karmically received your copy, go to martymac.com and order Never Give In to Fear. I cannot say enough things. You guys know. I don't read. I read this book. I picked it up. I could not put it down. Never Give In to Fear, Laughing All the Way Up from Rock Bottom at martymac.com. martymac.com. That tape also, on the Patterson tape, that the person that made it, can you tell me anything about their story? Like that wasn't someone that was looking for Bigfoot, right?
Oh, he absolutely was.
Oh, he was? Okay.
He really was, yeah. And so that adds another layer to it. Patterson died in the 70s, I believe. Bob Gimlin is still alive. He was the guy that was with him. Bob Gimlin insists, if it was a hoax, then he was hoaxed too. And he said it very much insists it was a natural animal that he saw there that day, or at least a living thing. I don't know if he insists if he says it's a natural animal or not. I'm not sure Bob's stance on that, but he's Bob's very convincing when he talks about it. But yeah, they were absolutely looking. They were looking, and they hadn't spent too much time looking for it either when they got the film. It was a matter of days, not weeks, I believe.
Wow! And where was that shot? Also,
Bluff Creek, California.
Okay. And actually, I believe I know, this is getting weird. I've played Bluff Creek. I guess I've played everywhere. I'm an old lady in show business. Up in, Northern California, where they have what is called the Trees of Mystery, which is really, it's not quite the redwoods, but it's like this big area with the thick trees that is supposed to be, prime Bigfoot. In fact, I think Bobcat Goldthwait shot his film there. He just made a film, I think 2 years ago.
Yes. Willow Creek. It was a very good film. Very good.
Right. You know what? I haven't seen that. I have to see that now. Also, what are your favorite, obviously a Bigfoot is a worldwide thing. Am I correct? Like, this is not, it's kind of like Mothman. When you dig in, you find someone in another country has seen something like that, or they have their own legends. Is that pretty much the same with Bigfoot?
Oh yeah, almost every culture in the world has their wild man. They call them by different names, but it's, I like to say these things have always lived in the woods beside us, in every culture, as far as I know, has some form of wild man.
Is there anything that accompanies them? In other words, I know when Mothman came up, there was UFO stuff going on. There was a bunch of odd stuff. Does anything seem to accompany Bigfoot?
Yeah, poltergeist activity. And this is stuff that... so if someone sees Bigfoot, the most common sightings are roadside crossings. So someone's driving along and they'll see one cross the road, or they'll see one beside the road. Or hunters will see them in the woods. Now, and these are the people that will insist, like these are natural creatures, because they've seen something acting very naturally. But when you get people that have repeat sightings, where these things come onto their property, for instance, they have a property and the creatures keep coming onto their property and they have repeated contact with them, then things get really weird. And these people will report poltergeist activity often. It's a matter of really, I'll just start asking questions like, okay, where are the weird lights? And how'd you know? I'm like, because there's always weird lights. And they'll start talking about weird lights that go along with it. And, strange noises in their houses and knocking on their houses. And they'll say, oh, Bigfoot's outside, but my house is haunted too. So it seems like this poltergeist activity kind of comes along with the creatures.
Interesting. That would sort of lend itself to that theory that maybe a door opens, an interdimensional type door opens, it's very rare that you hear about one. I guess UFOs are the only ones but that's fascinating. I've never heard that before. So they end up with the double barrel there. What is your favorite or a couple of, I would like to say, the most shocking Bigfoot encounters you've heard of?
Well, one of my favorites comes from 1920. If you'd like, I can read it.
Sure, go ahead.
I have it right here. So this is from Pennsylvania in the 1920s. I reprint it in my book called Bigfoot in Pennsylvania, which is all historical accounts. Now, they called them wild men or gorillas back then, but this is the winter in Pennsylvania. Gorillas are tropical animals. Like a lot of times in these old newspapers, they'll say, oh, it was an escaped gorilla. Well, a gorilla wouldn't last very long in Pennsylvania in the winter.
Someone would notice if their gorilla escaped, I would think.
Well, that's the other point. If you look, you can actually look up and see which circuses owned gorillas in 1920, and they were very expensive, and there were like one or two gorillas in all of the United States. So it doesn't make sense that it was an escaped circus gorilla. It's just what they had at the time. But in any case, this is the article from 1920. It's about a young boy who attacks one, and then it follows him home. So the appearance of a man-ape or gorilla in the mountains of Snyder County has caused great excitement among the residents of the section where the animal was seen. The big ape was first seen 3 weeks ago by Samuel Bolig of Miser, a small town in Snyder County. The animal is supposed to be one that escaped some time ago from a carnival and which has since been living in the mountains of that section of the state. Samuel and Margaret Bolig, the children of Charles Bolig, were gathering kindling wood one night in November with the light of a search lamp when a huge animal about 7 feet tall and that stood up like a man was discovered by the children within the circle of light. It looked to them like a huge monkey, and when discovered, dropped on all fours and ambled away, soon disappearing in the darkness. A week later, the same animal was discovered in a cornfield on the Bolig farm, which is at the foot of the mountain. Samuel procured a .32 caliber rifle and took a shot at the huge man creature, eventually wounding it as it fell at the shot, rolling over several times on the ground. The boy and his father trailed the wounded ape some distance by the blood, but were unable to overtake it, and at length gave up the pursuit. On Monday night of the present week, the strange creature made its third appearance on the Bolig farm. Charles Bolig was engaged in chopping wood by the light of the lantern when an ape approached near enough to be seen. The son ran to the house and procured the rifle, but before he could shoot the gorilla, it viciously attacked him, knocking him down and breaking his arm, and was finally driven away by the father. The lad lay on the ground in an unconscious condition. He was taken to the house and soon after recovered his senses, and it was found that he was not seriously injured. He suffered much from shock, but is expected to be fully recovered in a short time. A large number of men armed with rifles started out to hunt the animal, about 100 Lewistown hunters are scouring the Narrows and surrounding county toward the Snyder County line in the hope of getting a shot at the huge creature and killing it, as its presence has caused great consternation in this section, the gorilla being very dangerous on account of its great size, strength, and savage nature. So that's 1920 from the Altoona Tribune. Yeah, so it's and that was kind of a flap of gorilla sightings in 1920 that went across Pennsylvania. You can actually kind of follow it on a map as these newspaper reports these gorilla sightings all throughout the winter, and it kind of ends in the summer around Gettysburg. There's multiple sightings. Another guy shoots one in Gettysburg. It falls and chases him back into his house and then ambles away. And then it goes down to Maryland. You can actually find reports in Maryland later in the year.
Wow. Now, if they're shooting Bigfoot and he just gets up and runs, like, is it, I'm wondering, they said he was bleeding, but I'm like, do bullets not penetrate that animal like they would a human?
Well, the book I'm working on now is with a guest, and I believe you had Joshua Cutchin on your show before.
Oh, he's great. Yes. You know, that's weird, because I was going to ask you, because he was on our show, on my show. I have multiple personalities. He was on our show talking about the missing 411 thing, and he had a great theory about it being a fae. But yeah, so that's another great episode, folks, if you haven't heard. But you guys are working on a book. I interrupted you there. I got excited.
Yeah, Josh and I are working on a book together, and it's about all the strange stuff that goes hand in hand with Bigfoot. And this is the thing that a lot of people don't like to talk about, and a lot of these Bigfoot organizations just sweep it under the rug because it doesn't make sense for all this weird stuff to be around what they want to be just a giant monkey hanging out in the woods. And so we're really digging in, and he has a whole chapter called Bulletproof Bigfoot. And what that is account after account after account of people shooting these creatures and either it having no effect at all or them just falling and getting right back up and going about their business.
Wow, that's really, has he ever, we don't really have any accounts though of Bigfoot, abducting people or, have we ever, I guess you'd have to have someone else see it. Do we ever have any idea that a Bigfoot might have killed someone?
I don't think so. There are people who claim like some mysterious death, in, I'm trying to remember. There's an area down, what's called Land Between the Lakes. I think it's at Tennessee or somewhere. There was a mysterious death down there that people, claim was a Bigfoot, but they don't know. Like, no one knows, for sure. I don't think anybody's seen that happen. I have a couple old accounts of Bigfoot sort of kidnapping people and them, being recovered in one way or another. Those tend to get really, really strange. The one I have is from, I think, Washington State in the 1800s, and it reads like, Josh loves it because it reads like a fairy abduction. The Bigfoot takes the kid underground, and it's a cave filled with diamonds and weird singing and so forth. It gets very, very strange. But so there are a couple accounts of Bigfoot supposedly taking people, but I think if they're responsible for taking people in other cases, we never hear from them again. I don't know. It's a very strange thing. I guess it's hard to talk about because there aren't that many witnesses that come back, I guess, if they are taken.
Right. The other thing too, and this is a weird kind of off question about the paranormal community, because I guess it does what people, I think we're kind of past this, but I know people in this community for a long time were very used to being picked on or made fun of or, kind of, he's a Bigfoot guy or something. But I think it's interesting, they're perceiving it as, I saw Bigfoot and I saw a fairy and I saw, you know what I mean? Like the more that you say, the crazier it sounds, which seems to be the opposite. Like I said, even with that that Mothman or the Skinwalker Ranch, or I was just talking to Jeff Belanger about the Bridgewater Triangle, where it seems like these things are not just one and done. There seems to be many things going on, which again, I go with the interdimensional theory. Has anyone ever woke up and had one in their house?
Not to my knowledge. There's people claim they've entered the house, but it's very weird. Like these things almost
too smart.
So there's these old vampire legends where you have to invite them in, and Men in Black seem to work the same way. It's almost like they respect the borders, because they could easily, these things, if they're they're 8 foot tall and 900 pounds, or 9 foot tall, or 12 foot tall, some people say, they could walk right through the walls of most houses. They certainly could pick up a tent, and carry people away inside the tent. But it's almost like they respect these borders. They'll knock on windows, they'll slap walls, but they don't tend to come in. It's very, very rare. People even say they'll jiggle the handles of the door. They'll see the handles move of the door and stuff. And for some reason, it's like they do not enter. I don't know why.
Well, it's very nice to have a crypto creature that is polite. I will say that. I have a whole line of questions here for you, so I'm stumbling over them one at a time. Odd question. These are just pieces of information that I have gathered. Do we ever see two of them together?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. People have seen, two and even multiple creatures at times.
And is it like a family, or it's just two, or do we, you know what I mean? Like
some people have seen like two big ones and two little ones, and they're assuming it's a family unit. I would assume so as well. I guess if I saw the same thing and other people have seen, larger groupings of them, that one woman reported seeing, I think it was 5 of them on a beach outside of Monterey.
I've played there too. I think you've been Bigfoot is stalking me. It's interesting when people, and it's a weird kind of analogy, but I grew up behind my house was a golf course and some woods, not too much, but every once in a while, like a moose or a deer would come close enough to the house, or moose would come down from Canada, and it's almost like sometimes when you sneak up on each other, or you aren't aware of each other, and you turn around and you make that eye contact with an animal like that, where there's this. It's immediate connection, but you're kind of like, are you going to hurt me? No, are you going to hurt me? Like, it's kind of that weird. Is that when people run into a Bigfoot, is that mostly just we stared at each other and then it just went its own way?
Yeah, I don't know. And in defense of the folks who do think it's a giant monkey, it often has some very ape-like traits. It seems like it rocks back and forth. This is a known primate trait. When primates get upset, it will do that. The hair stands up on, when it seems like it's agitated. This again is a known primate trait. People will say it looks like it's smiling. Well, we're the only primate where a smile is a good thing. Animals, gorillas and stuff, when they're smiling at you, that's not a good thing.
Isn't that showing their teeth? They're showing their teeth means I'm going to bite you.
It's usually not a happy sign. So you get these indications that they do have some very primate like things that they do. So maybe they're just kind of get away, get out of here. Maybe that's what they're doing when they're doing those things. And I forgot your question, so I hope I answered it.
That's okay. I do that to people. I have that airy way. Yeah. And you know what else? It's interesting. When one time when I was working at the Sahara in Vegas, I feel like I'm dropping names with you. I'm not really like this, Tim. It just is happening. Our comedy show would go after the white tigers. The guy had, it wasn't Siegfried, it was another magician that had those giant white tigers. And you do not realize they would put them in a cage backstage. And as we were waiting to go on, they'd have 5 guys and it would be in the cage. You do not realize how big that tiger is until you're close to the cage, and you don't get real close to the cage because I don't think they ever get out and they're all chained in. But there has been occasion where I think they can really grab you out of, but I swear the head of those tigers was so much more enormous. And then you look at the size of the teeth and you're like, we'd have no chance. In fact, I always have my dog with me, and he was in a little room in the back, and no one told me, we needed an adult in the room, that if I had brought him at all near where the tigers could smell him, they turn what they call green-eyed, where the eyes go green and they become so violent that they don't know if they can hold them in the cage because they,
Wow.
Yeah. But I'll never get over, I have an obsession with lions, and I always think, no, you know what I mean? Did you ever see that dumb YouTube video where the lady got out with her kid and walked over to see it was the cheetah or something, and then she kind of realized, oh, I forgot these are not safe. We should get back in the car. Like you don't realize. I can't imagine with a Bigfoot. That's why I say it's that feeling. You must just freeze. You must just be like, oh my God, am I dreaming?
Yeah, and that's, a lot of witnesses I talk to, that's what they just say, I can't tell you how big it was. Like, it didn't make sense. Like, I cannot relate to you how big this was.
And hang on one second, folks. We will be right back. Who do tarot readers go for tarot readings? They go to Melissa Sonova at melissasonova.com. She gave me the best reading a couple of months ago that is still resonating and helping me out now. She is authentic and to the point. You loved her on the podcast. She is the no BS tarot reader. She also has a tarot class online right now. Check it out. Just watching the promo, you will see how much fun you are going to have while you learn. Also, check out her book, which is always right beside me when I'm doing my readings or my tarot card for me in the morning. It is called Kitchen Table Tarot, and you will love it. Melissa Sonova, that's MELISSACYNOVA. Check her out. Okay, so next on my list of questions to ask you is, I don't know where I heard this, is Bigfoot vegetarian? Or has he ever bit someone? Do we know? Did anybody have a bite ever?
I want to say in some of these attacks, somebody's gotten bitten.
Okay, because it doesn't seem like their style. They're kind of, if you're big, there's no reason to bite.
But they, from reports, they kill and eat animals, deer and raccoons and anything they can get their hand on.
Oh, okay. I don't know where I got that information. I
think it used to be the general trope. I think that, like in the 70s, because that was my impression too for a long time, that they were, these gentle forest giants, and just the evidence doesn't seem to bear that out. No,
I guess not. And also, but they don't seem territorial. They seem to be like, I always tried to work on the joke. They always seem to be walking. They're never, the to-do list must be enormous because do they ever see them sitting or stopping?
Got a report of someone laying down, but it was actively like digging in a log for presumably grubs or something. It was tearing apart, a log as it was laying there. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Sitting down, maybe one or two of those in those old reports, somebody saw it like sunning itself on a rock or something. They said, but it's not common at all. Yeah, they're very. They're like me. They're very active. Now, is it a rumor, or do UFO conferences kind of people and Bigfoot people not get along? Well, I think that used to be the case. I think there used to be, UFO people didn't want to talk about Bigfoot because, Bigfoot's crazy. UFOs are real. And Bigfoot people, well, a lot of Bigfoot people are still the same. They do not want to talk about how often UFOs and Bigfoot are seen around the same place at the same time. In fact, I was actually contacted by a person, a Bigfoot researcher, who told me that I needed to stop talking about those things because it makes us sound crazy.
Oh,
and I
stop.
said, well, yeah, I said, if a witness tells me they saw, an 8-foot tall ape man, and then the same witness or another one says, I also saw a UFO in the same place, a day later or the same day or whatever, I'm not going to not note them. I think it's very important, that these people are talking about these things in conjunction to one another. How rare is it to see a Bigfoot? How rare is it to see a UFO? The fact that people are seeing them, like I said, or at the same time or around the same time in the same places, I think is very important information, and I'm not going to ignore it. So, but I think the community in general is getting better about that all around. I think people are sort of taking a more holistic approach to the paranormal, which I think is very good.
Yeah, and I feel like it's definitely becoming more accepted. Somebody always believes something. You may not believe UFOs, but you'll believe in ghosts, or you may one or the other. And I think, I know everybody hates Hollywood, but sometimes that's what happens out here is we make something more normal. And I think, I do think that, community, you're making the community look bad. When everything was smaller, maybe so, but now it feels like it's, everything's a little more spread out. So that's good. I don't know, do you suggest people go looking for Bigfoot alone, or is it one of these things where they should go to a conference or learn what they're doing, or any suggestions on that?
Probably, it's always good to have a partner in the woods, whether you're looking for Bigfoot or not.
Yes.
I would advise in general. I mean, that said, I don't take my own advice. I'm out in the woods alone quite often myself. But, I'd say very much trust your instincts and pay attention to what goes on around you. And if something doesn't feel right, and if something's screaming at you, it's probably a reason it's screaming at you, and it probably doesn't want you there. So you take that information and use it, do what you will with it. But, in general, I'd say if you're comfortable in the woods, you're probably going to be okay. Just, again, pay attention. I was attacked by a rabid raccoon. Had nothing to do with Bigfoot. You know what I mean? So there's all kinds of stuff out there,
Did the raccoon get you?
No, I got the raccoon, but, it was my son and I were walking together, and he said, "Is that a raccoon?" I said, "Yeah, that's a raccoon." And then it came at us, growling and snarling. I told my son to run and put myself between him and the raccoon. And by luck or skill, I don't know, I had a walking stick, and I won the battle. But, I'm not sure whether that was luck or skill.
Right. Well, whenever I hear rabid, I think needle in the stomach. Isn't that what happens when you get bit by something with rabies?
Well, I had to get the rabies shots anyway because I was in close proximity to it, and I had cuts on my legs from thorns and stuff. So the hospital said, "You better go ahead and get the rabies shots." And it's like 9 or something, but it's in arms and legs now. No more in the stomach. But
God.
It's still not fun.
It's a 9-inch needle?
No, not 9 different needles.
Oh.
So you get 9 different shots. So,
God, I was going to say, every show I find the place to go, ladies and gentlemen, there's your nightmare. That was it, 9-inch needle. I was like, where does that go?
No. The regular needles, you just have to get 9 of them, but they're not fun. And then the vaccine makes you feel cruddy too. It's just, if you can avoid having to get rabies shots, do it.
Okay, another good tip. And if you see something like this, I can't imagine that I would be in control of my faculties to think, run or don't run. But if you run, have they been known to chase, or it wouldn't even matter because they could reach out and grab you?
The general thought is, you're not going to outrun it. Like these people have reported them like running beside cars, like pacing cars. So you're not going to outrun it. The general sort of accepted wisdom is treat it like a predator. So treat it like a bear, or something like that. Back away and give it its space, and don't run, because we know with other predators that if you run, like, it'll kick in their chase instinct or their hunting instinct or whatever it is.
Wow, run means chase, yeah. And now you said they scream.
Oh yeah.
So there's not a language; it's just a terrifying scream, I'm sure.
Well, there's a guy named Ron Moorhead, and he was in recording in the Sierra Nevada mountains, in the 70s. Another newspaper recorder named Al Berry was up there with him, and a couple other hunters, and they have recorded multiple tapes of what a language expert has termed to be language. Now, he can't tell you what they're saying, but he can tell it's a language. He was a cryptolinguist with the Navy, and they have hours and hours of these things. And this guy analyzed them, and he said, I cannot tell you what they're saying, but I can tell you there is language here. So it appears that these, now, he didn't see them speaking. These are recordings they made while they were inside a cabin, but they were having Bigfoot activity around the cabin, so they presume it was Bigfoot that was making this unknown language, whatever it was.
So it's a scream that or our language. Is it identifiable, or we might be like, that sounds like birds or monkeys or I don't know. Like, is it kind of an I can't imagine what it would sound like.
The screams are incredibly powerful. By report, the recordings I've heard of them, they almost sound like air raid sirens or something. They have a kind of a build to them like that. The language sounds like, they call it samurai chatter. It sounds like a very deep, kind of angry, almost Japanese kind of inflection to it. It's out there. If you go to, I think it's ronmoorhead.com or Sierra Sounds, he has actual samples of it you can actually listen to, or even probably just type in Sierra Sounds in YouTube. You can actually hear what it sounds like.
I think I can, maybe I can find that on YouTube and play it after us here. Okay.
It's very interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting.
And I just have a few more questions for you. So when it comes to tapes on the internet, because everything now has a different set of skepticism to it, because there's an app, because there's a million ways to fake something. So that Patterson tape, Patterson Gibson, right?
Gimlin.
Yeah. That still looks like a great piece of evidence, I think. And are there any others that you watch and you really go, I can't debunk that?
I'm not great with that. I'm not a video expert, and there's been things I've seen before where I was like, oh, that looks really good, and then it's come out, it's been a hoax later. So I tend not to weigh in on stuff. I'll take other experts, opinions. There's the Paul Freeman footage isn't supposed to be pretty good stuff. I really don't know. My opinion on video and photo in regards to this stuff, Mitch Hedberg, a comedian, he had a great Bigfoot joke where he said, I think Bigfoot's just blurry, and that's really scary.
Yeah.
and I kind of agree with that in a weird way. It's not that it's blurry, it's that I don't think... It's like we're allowed to make sound recordings for some reason, and this applies across the board with the paranormal. For some reason, we're allowed to make sound recordings of this stuff, but photos and videos, they never come out right. I think the Patterson film, I don't know why it was all analog. Maybe that has something to do with it. But it just seems like for whatever reason we're not allowed to video this stuff. It always turns out blurry or fuzzy or inconclusive in one way or another. So I don't spend a lot of time with video. I get sent literally hundreds of photos of what people claim is Bigfoot. And, a lot of times the only thing I can tell people is you were there, you took the photo, but I don't see what you're telling me is there. Because a lot of it looks like dark shadows in leaves to me, and they're claiming it's a Bigfoot. But, they're the witnesses. They were there. They know what they were photographing, and these things, are masters of camouflage and hiding and so forth. presumably that's not why we're not seeing them all the time.
Yeah.
So if they tell me they really felt there was a creature there, I'll take their word for it. But the best I can say often to these photos is, I just don't see what you're saying is there.
That's kind of a good. That's a nice overall too, because I get a lot of people that send me ghost photos, and unless I can. And even sometimes you can kind of clearly debunk, but I really actually love your theory there that maybe we're not supposed to have photos. Cause I used to work with a team, and I remember hearing someone say to another person, they let you take their picture. They're good about letting you. And I thought, that is interesting that maybe it's a different vibration, or there's more, they're communicating more than telepathically than we know. But it also goes to the theory that I just had a guy on Chris Balzano talking about New England ghosts, and he had that where they actually were in a home, and it was almost like one ghost, I think he said, was training the other, like, okay, you can't talk now because they're taping us. Something that. And it knew what a tape recorder was and stuff. So it's kind of interesting that I bet they have way more access to us than we do to them.
Yeah, I would agree. They tend to be in control of the situation.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Well, listen. So Tim, first of all, tell us about the books that are already out. You have 4 books out.
Yeah, my first book was called Beyond the Seventh Gate, and that looks into local, so that's mostly York, Lancaster, and Adams County stuff. There's a lot of Bigfoot in there. It deals with the Toad Road legend, which they've made an independent movie about it and so forth. But I tell the real story of Toad Road, which actually has to do with cryptids more than ghosts and so forth. And that kind of really got me into it. And then I have 2 historical Bigfoot books, Bigfoot in Pennsylvania, which is all historical Bigfoot articles in Pennsylvania, obviously, and then one called Bigfoot West Coast Wild Men, which is the same thing, but it's California, Oregon, and Washington State. And then my 4th book is called Don't Look Behind You, and it's kind of a follow-up to the first book, but this is all my experiences. Well, not all. This is more witness accounts, and then a lot of my own experiences as I've gone out and researched this stuff. So there's a lot of like high strangeness and just oddities and so forth that I've experienced that I included in Don't Look Behind You, which is my latest book.
What a great name.
Oh, thanks.
That's great. And you and Joshua are working on a book.
And Josh and I are working on a book. It's called Where the Footprints End, and that's going to be all Bigfoot as well.
That's great. He really has some. He reaches out a little further than the regular. I like his theories. He reaches out a little further, and it all makes sense. And the podcast is called Strange Familiars. Yes,
Strange Familiars, and that's at strangefamiliars.com. And all my contact information is there. Anybody, if you want to get signed copies of my books, you can get them there, or they're all on Amazon, and that's fine with me if people want to get them from Amazon. That doesn't hurt my feelings.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Tim. It was great. This is my first Bigfoot experience. It's been very good.
Oh, good. Well, thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you. Okay, that was fascinating. I did not know anything about Bigfoot, and that was so good. Tim was great. And also, so now I did look up what he was talking about, and it's called Sasquatch Sierra Sounds. I have it. I'm going to play some of it for you now. It's by Ron Moorhead and Al Berry. And when you listen to this, you'll hear some of them talking over it. Obviously, you'll be able to tell the difference between a human and a Sasquatch. And it's pretty creepy. It's very, very creepy. All I can say is turn the lights on when you listen to this. Also, don't forget to give me a review or leave some stars wherever you listen to me on iTunes or wherever. Also, don't forget you can always get a tarot reading from me at karenrontowski.com or paranormalkaren.com. Don't forget to send me your conspiracies, your ghost stories. Maybe you got a Bigfoot story. I would love to hear it. The Mothman stories were great. All right, everybody, here we go. Here's your nightmare.
Like laughing at it.
That's our job. Now we know where we went for tracks and all that for sure. I heard them cross the creek. There's two of them across the creek at the big rocks. It's a hard act to follow.
He sounds like he talks to us and they talk to each other.
Yeah. Right there, I just seen movement right through there.
Wow. Well, there you go. Everybody, we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.